The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the voices of 12 different species. Speaker Vorthak stood tall at the center, his crystal body catching the light from 3 suns that shone through the massive windows. His voice echoed across the chamber as he addressed the gathered representatives. "Again, we waste time on these old stories," Vorthak said, his tone sharp with annoyance. "There are no humans. There never were humans. These are just tales to scare children." The Kavarian representative, General Thexvor, slammed his 4-armed fist on the metal table. "The old texts speak of them clearly, a species that could survive anywhere, that could fight like demons and think like gods." "Fairy tales," Vorthak replied with a dismissive wave. "Show me proof, show me bones, show me ships, show me anything real." The debate had gone on for hours. Some believed the ancient records that spoke of humans as the first spacefaring race. Others thought they were just myths created by primitive civilizations trying to explain things they could not understand. The meeting ended like all the others, with no agreement and growing frustration. Far from the political arguments of Nexus Prime, Dr. Minho carefully brushed dirt from a strange metal object. He worked alone in the ruins of what had once been a great city on a dead planet at the edge of the Sol system. His hands shook with excitement as he uncovered more of the artifact. The metal was unlike anything he had ever seen. It felt warm to the touch and seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that matched the ancient texts about humans that most people dismissed as fiction. "This cannot be real," he whispered to himself, but the evidence was right there in his hands. Dr. Yuna arrived at the dig site 3 days later, her transport ship kicking up clouds of red dust as it landed. She was Minho's closest friend and fellow scientist, but she was also one of the strongest voices against the human myths. "You called me here for this?" she asked, looking at the collection of artifacts Minho had gathered. "These could be from any dead civilization. This system is full of old ruins." "Look at the symbols," Minho insisted, pointing to the markings on the largest piece. "They match the human language from the Codex Antiquus perfectly." Yuna picked up one of the smaller artifacts and turned it over in her hands. The metal was strange, she had to admit. It was lighter than it should be and warmer than the cold air around them, but she was not ready to believe. "The Codex could be wrong," she said. "Or these could be copies made by some other species that found the same stories we did." Minho led her deeper into the ruins. The dead city stretched for kilometers in every direction. Massive towers reached toward the sky, their surfaces covered in the same strange symbols. In the center of the city, a huge pyramid rose from the ground, its black stone surface smooth as glass. "I have been studying this place for 2 months," Minho said. "The technology here is far beyond anything we know. Look at this." He showed her a section of wall where the stone seemed to flow like water when touched. Strange lights danced beneath the surface, responding to movement and heat. The architecture was beautiful but alien, designed by minds that thought differently than any current galactic species. "Even if this is real," Yuna said, though her voice was less certain now, "it does not prove anything about humans. This could be any ancient race." That night, as they sat around their small camp, Minho shared his real discovery. He had been afraid to tell anyone, even Yuna, because it sounded too impossible to believe. "I think someone is watching us," he said quietly. Yuna looked up from her datapad. "What do you mean?" "I have seen movement in the ruins. Shadows that do not match the light. Footprints that appear overnight and disappear by morning. Someone or something knows we are here." Yuna wanted to dismiss this as Minho's imagination, but she had felt it too. The sensation of being observed. The feeling that they were not alone on this dead world. She had blamed it on nerves and the strangeness of the place, but now she was not so sure. The next morning brought their first real proof. They found a new artifact sitting exactly where their camp had been, as if someone had placed it there while they slept. It was a small cube made of the same strange metal as the others, but this one was different. This one was active. Soft blue light pulsed within the cube, and when Yuna touched it, the light grew brighter. Symbols appeared on its surface, shifting and changing like living things. The cube was clearly some kind of device, and it was clearly functional. "This is impossible," Yuna breathed. Technology this old should not still be working. Minho was already setting up his translation equipment, unless it was designed to last forever, unless whoever made it knew someone would eventually find it. As they worked to decode the symbols, both scientists felt the weight of being watched grow stronger. Sometimes, out of the corner of their eyes, they thought they saw figures moving among the distant ruins. But when they looked directly, there was nothing there. The breakthrough came on their fourth day at the site. The cube suddenly projected a holographic map showing the entire city. Red markers appeared at dozens of locations, including one that pulsed directly beneath the Great Pyramid. "It is showing us something," Minho said, his voice filled with wonder. "Guiding us somewhere." Yuna stared at the map, her scientific skepticism warring with growing excitement. If this is real, if these really are human ruins, then everything we thought we knew about galactic history is wrong. They packed their equipment and headed for the pyramid. The journey across the dead city took most of the day. As they walked, they began to notice details they had missed before. The ruins were not just ancient, they were impossibly well preserved. Streets that should have been buried under millennia of dust were clear. Buildings that should have collapsed were still standing strong. The entrance to the pyramid was sealed by a door made of the same black stone as the walls. But when Minho approached with the cube, the door simply melted away, revealing a corridor that stretched down into darkness. "We should call for backup," Yuna said, but her voice lacked conviction. They both knew that if they reported this now, the site would be flooded with officials and politicians. Their chance to make the discovery of the century would be lost. The corridor led to a vast underground chamber filled with more technology than either scientist had ever seen. Massive screens covered the walls, all dark and silent. Strange machines hummed quietly in the corners. And in the center of the room, a pillar of crystal rose from floor to ceiling, pulsing with the same blue light as the cube. As they approached the crystal pillar, the screens around the room began to flicker to life. Images appeared, showing star charts and planetary data, technical diagrams that hurt to look at directly, and faces, alien faces, but somehow familiar. "These are the other galactic species," Yuna whispered, "but the images are wrong. They look different. Younger somehow." Minho was studying the technical diagrams when he realized what they were seeing. "These are not images of our current civilizations. These are images of how they looked thousands of years ago. This technology has been watching and recording for millennia." The implications were staggering. If this was real, then someone had been observing the galaxy's development for far longer than any known civilization had existed. Someone with technology so advanced that they could monitor entire star systems without being detected. As if responding to their thoughts, the crystal pillar pulsed brighter. New images appeared on the screens. Ships unlike anything in the current galactic fleet. Beings that looked almost familiar, but not quite like any known species. And then, finally, the image they had been hoping and fearing to see. Humans. The beings on the screens were clearly the same species described in the ancient texts. They walked upright on two legs like some galactic species, but their faces were different, more expressive. Their eyes held an intelligence that seemed to burn with inner fire. And when they moved, there was a grace and purpose that spoke of absolute confidence. "They are real," Minho breathed. But as they watched the images, both scientists began to realize something else. The humans in the recordings were not primitive ancestors of a dead civilization. Their technology was clearly more advanced than anything the current galaxy possessed. Their ships moved through space in ways that seemed to violate known physics. Their cities made the greatest galactic capitals look like small towns. "If they were this advanced," Yuna said slowly, "where did they go? What happened to them?" The answer came as the final image appeared on the screens. A massive fleet of human ships, thousands of them, moving away from the galaxy itself. Not destroyed, not conquered, gone by choice. And in the bottom corner of the image, a timestamp that made both scientists' blood run cold. The fleet had left only 500 years ago. In galactic terms, that was yesterday. The humans were not an ancient myth. They were a recent departure. As they stared at the screens in shock, neither scientist noticed the figure watching them from the shadows of the chamber. Neither saw the small device in its hand that had been recording everything they said and did. And neither realized that their discovery had just triggered a signal that would travel faster than light to the edge of the galaxy, carrying a simple message to those who had been waiting. The Watchers had been found. It was time to come home. 3 months had passed since Minho and Yuna's discovery, and the small archaeological dig had grown into a massive operation. Commander Jiho of the Galactic Survey Corps now oversaw a team of 50 specialists working around the clock to understand the human ruins. The base camp sprawled across several kilometers, with temporary buildings housing laboratories, communication centers, and living quarters. Transport ships arrived daily, bringing new equipment and personnel. The dead planet had become the most important archaeological site in galactic history. Communications specialist Hana worked day and night to maintain contact with the Galactic Council. The politicians wanted constant updates, though they still argued about whether the findings were real. Some demanded the site be sealed until they could send their own teams. Others wanted immediate access to any technology that might be found. Another message from Speaker Vorthak, Hana reported to Commander Jiho. He wants all artifacts shipped to Nexus Prime for proper analysis. Jiho grimaced. He was a career military officer who had spent decades exploring unknown worlds, but he had never encountered anything like this. The human technology they were uncovering made his most advanced equipment look like children's toys. Tell the speaker we are still in the preliminary research phase, Jiho replied. Nothing leaves this planet until we understand what we are dealing with. Military advisor Colonel Taewon approached with his daily security report. The gruff veteran had been skeptical of the human theory until he saw the evidence himself. Now he spent his time worrying about threats that might come from beyond the galaxy. Perimeter sensors detected another anomaly last night, Taewon said. Something moved through the outer ruins, but when the patrol arrived, there was nothing there. How many times this month? Jiho asked. 17. Always the same pattern. Movement detected, investigation launched, nothing found. But the team's report feeling watched. Dr. So-young, the team's chief linguist, had made more progress decoding human writing than anyone thought possible. She worked in a converted laboratory filled with artifacts covered in the strange symbols. Her breakthrough had come when she realized the human language was not entirely alien. It shared roots with several current galactic languages, as if it had influenced their development over time. I have translated another section of the data core, So-young announced as she entered the command center. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with excitement. You need to see this immediately. She activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red lines connected dozens of star systems, creating a web that covered nearly every inhabited world. This is a network, she explained. The humans did not just live in this galaxy, they shaped it. These lines show connections between human outposts and intervention points. They have been watching and guiding galactic development for millions of years. Commander Jiho stared at the map in silence. The implications were staggering. Every major galactic civilization was connected to the network. Every important historical event had occurred near one of the marked locations. Are you saying humans have been controlling galactic history? He asked. Not controlling, So-young replied. Guiding, protecting. The records suggest they prevented catastrophic wars, shared knowledge during critical periods, and helped struggling civilizations survive. Natural disasters. Colonel Taewon pointed to a cluster of markers near the galactic core. What are these? They are different from the others. So-young's expression grew troubled. Those are not intervention points. They are warnings. The records call them dark. Zones where something terrible happened, something that made the humans decide to leave. Before anyone could ask more questions, the archaeological team's most important discovery began to activate. The crystal pillar in the underground chamber suddenly blazed with light, its blue glow visible even from the surface. Every piece of human technology in the ruins began to respond, creating a symphony of lights and sounds that could be heard for kilometers. Dr. Minho was in the chamber when it happened. He had been working there for weeks, trying to understand the pillar's function. When it activated, the screens around him filled with new images. Not recordings this time, but live feeds from across the galaxy. The screens showed Nexus Prime, where the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session. They showed military bases where fleets were being mobilized. They showed scientific stations where researchers were frantically trying to decode their own human artifacts. The technology was not just recording history, it was watching everything. That happened in real time. But the most shocking image appeared on the largest screen. A view of space beyond the galaxy's edge, where something massive moved in the darkness. Ships unlike anything in the current galactic fleet, so large they seemed more like mobile cities than vessels. And they were heading toward the galaxy at impossible speeds. "Commander Ji-ho, to the underground chamber immediately," Min-ho called. Over his communicator, his voice tight with urgency. When the command team arrived, they found the chamber transformed. The screens showed tactical displays, star charts, and technical readouts that hurt to look at directly. The crystal pillar pulsed with energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The activation was triggered by something external. So-young explained as she studied the symbols flowing across the screens. "This whole facility is designed to respond to specific signals. Someone or something just told it to wake up." Admiral Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the massive starship Eternal Dawn, watching the signal analysis with grim satisfaction. His fleet had been waiting at the galaxy's edge for 5 centuries, watching and preparing for this moment. The automated beacon from their old outpost had finally activated, meaning someone had found the ruins and triggered the awakening protocol. "How long since the signal was sent?" he asked his communications officer. "Approximately 4 hours, sir. The transmission was encoded with emergency protocols." Hyun-woo nodded. The emergency codes meant that whoever had found the outpost was not alone. Other forces were mobilizing. The galactic civilizations his people had spent so long protecting were about to learn the truth about their history. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "Begin Phase 1 of the return protocol. It is time to go home." The Eternal Dawn was only one ship in a fleet that numbered in the thousands. Each vessel was larger than the greatest ships in the current galactic navy, powered by technology that could manipulate space and time itself. They had been built for one purpose: to return to the galaxy when their people were needed again. Back on the dead planet, the archaeological team watched in amazement as more systems came online throughout the ruins. Ancient machinery that had been silent for centuries began to hum with power. Lights appeared in buildings that had been dark since before current galactic civilization began. "The entire city is reactivating," reported Hana from her communication post. "I am detecting energy signatures from structures we have not even explored yet." Dr. Yuna had been studying the activated systems when she made a disturbing discovery. The reactivation was not random. It was following a specific pattern, bringing online systems in a precise sequence. Someone was controlling the process remotely. "This is not an automatic response," she announced to the command team. "Something is actively operating these systems. We are not alone here." Colonel Taewon immediately ordered increased security patrols, but his soldiers found nothing. Whatever was controlling the ancient technology was either invisible to their sensors or operating from a location they could not reach. The answer came when Dr. So-young successfully activated what appeared to be the city's main communication system. The screens in the underground chamber suddenly showed a new image. Not a recording or a live feed from somewhere else, but a direct transmission from space. A human face appeared on the screen. Male, middle-aged, with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong, carrying the authority of absolute command. "I am Admiral Hyun-woo of the Human Expeditionary Fleet," the figure said. "We have received your signal and are responding. You have done well to preserve our heritage, but your time as guardians is now ended. We are coming home." The transmission lasted only moments, but its impact was immediate. Every person in the chamber understood that they had just made first contact with a species that was supposed to be mythical, a species whose technology was clearly beyond anything the current galaxy possessed. "How long until they arrive?" "Commander," Ji-ho asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. So-young worked frantically to decode the technical data that had accompanied the transmission. When she found the answer, her face went white. "According to their flight data, the human fleet will reach the outer rim of our galaxy in 72 hours, she said. "And based on their ship configurations, they are not coming alone. The fleet consists of over 3,000 vessels. The implications hit everyone at once. A technologically superior force of unknown intentions was about to enter galactic space. Every military analyst had studied scenarios like this, but none had imagined the invaders would be the legendary humans themselves. "We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately," Jiho said. "They need to know what is coming." The bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship trembled as proximity alarms screamed throughout the massive vessel. Admiral Sungjae rushed to the main display, where his tactical officers stared in confusion at their readings. "Report," he demanded, though part of him already knew what they would say. "Sir, we have a contact at bearing 270, Lieutenant Bora announced, her voice shaking. "But the readings make no sense. The object appeared from nowhere, and is not showing up on half our sensors." Sungjae studied the display with growing dread. 3 days had passed since the archaeological team's report about returning humans. The Galactic Council had been in emergency session ever since, with half the members demanding military mobilization and the other half insisting the whole thing was an elaborate hoax. Now something was actually here. "Size estimate?" Sungjae asked. "That is the problem, sir. Different sensors are giving different readings. Visual suggests approximately 2 kilometers in length, but mass detectors show something much larger. And the energy signature—" She paused, checking her instruments again. "Sir, the energy signature is off our scale." Captain Dongyun stood on the bridge of the Silent Observer, watching the galactic fleet scramble to respond to his ship's arrival. He had commanded stealth operations for over 2 centuries, but this was the first time he had deliberately revealed himself to the current galactic civilizations. "Tactical assessment, Lieutenant Minsok?" he asked his weapons officer. "Their weapons systems are powering up, but they cannot achieve target lock. Their targeting computers cannot compensate for our defensive fields," Minsok replied with professional calm. "Estimated threat level, negligible." Dongyun nodded. The technology gap was even larger than their intelligence reports had suggested. The current galactic species had made impressive progress since humanity's departure, but they were still working with primitive understanding of physics and energy manipulation. "Open a channel to the largest vessel," he ordered. "It is time to make our presence known officially." On Nexus Prime, Speaker Vorthak paced frantically in the council chambers while representatives from 12 species argued loudly about their response to the crisis. The Kavarian delegation wanted immediate military action. The crystalline Vorth demanded proof that the approaching ships were actually human. The peaceful Melody insisted on diplomatic contact. "Silence!" Vorthak roared, his crystal body flashing with angry light. "We must decide our response before—" He was interrupted as every communication device in the chamber activated simultaneously. Screens flickered to life, showing the same image, a human face with calm, intelligent eyes and an expression of patient authority. "Citizens of the galaxy," the figure said, his voice somehow reaching every inhabited world at the same time. I'm Ambassador Jiwoo of the Human Diplomatic Corps. We have been watching your development with great interest and pride. Your civilizations have grown beyond our greatest hopes." The council chamber fell completely silent. Several representatives had stopped breathing. The Kavarian General Thexvor reached for his sidearm before remembering that the image was just a transmission. "However," Ambassador Jiwoo continued, "recent events have forced us to end our period of observation. We are returning to reclaim our role as guardians of this galaxy. We come not as conquerors, but as protectors returning to our home." The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun, leaving the council in chaos. Some representatives demanded immediate military response. Others called for evacuation of their homeworlds. A few suggested surrender before any fighting could begin. Back on the archaeological dig, Dr. Minho watched the same transmission with a mixture of excitement and terror. The underground chamber had become the unofficial communication center. Between the dig site and the approaching human fleet, every day brought new revelations about humanity's true capabilities. "The linguistic analysis is complete," Dr. So-Young announced as she joined Minho in the chamber. The ambassador's message was broadcast simultaneously in over 40 languages, including several that are considered classified military codes. "They know more about our civilizations than we know about ourselves." Dr. Yuna was studying the technical readouts that continued to stream from the human ship's sensors. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about technology and physics. Their ship is not just invisible to some of our sensors, she explained to Commander Jiho. It exists in a state of quantum flux that makes it partially outside normal spacetime. That is why our readings are inconsistent. We are trying to measure something that is not entirely in our dimension. The commander felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying they can exist outside our reality? I am saying they have mastered physics in ways we cannot even understand. If these readings are accurate, their technology is not just advanced. It is fundamentally different from anything we thought was possible. The proof of humanity's technological supremacy came when General Thexvor decided to test their defenses. Against direct orders from Speaker Vorthak, he commanded a squadron of Kavarian warships to approach the human vessel and demand its surrender. Captain Dong Yun watched the approaching ships with mild interest. The Kavarian vessels were impressive by current galactic standards, armed with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes that could crack planetary shields. Their crews were experienced warriors who had fought in dozens of conflicts. Should we respond? To their weapons lock? Lieutenant Minseok asked. No need, Dong Yun replied calmly. Activate Demonstration Protocol 7. The silent observer did not fire a single weapon. Instead, it simply adjusted its gravitational field generators. The approaching Kavarian ships suddenly found themselves unable to maintain course as space itself bent around them. Their weapons discharged harmlessly into twisted dimensions, while their navigation systems reported impossible readings. Within minutes, the entire squadron was spinning helplessly in space, their crews unconscious from gravitational stress and their ships completely disabled. The human vessel remained exactly where it had been, apparently unaffected by the encounter. Transmission from the Kavarian flagship, the communications officer reported. Let me guess, Dong Yun said with a slight smile. They surrender. The demonstration sent shockwaves throughout the galactic military. If humans could disable an entire squadron without firing a shot, what could they do if they actually wanted to fight? Military analysts worked frantically to develop new strategies, but every simulation ended the same way. Complete galactic defeat in a matter of hours. On the dead planet, the archaeological team made their most disturbing discovery yet. Deep in the human database, Dr. So Young found records that explained why humanity had left the galaxy 5 centuries earlier. They were not exploring, she announced to the gathered team. They were fleeing. Commander Jiho felt his blood run, cold. Fleeing from what? So Young activated the main display, showing star charts that dated back millions of years. Red zones marked areas where entire civilizations had vanished without explanation. The pattern was clear. Something had been moving through the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. They called them the Devourers, she explained. Entities from outside our galaxy that feed on life itself. The humans spent thousands of years fighting them before realizing they could not win with current galactic technology. So they left to develop better weapons? Colonel Taewon asked. No, So Young replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They left to build an army. The records indicate they spent 5 centuries creating technology and gathering allies from other galaxies. They have been preparing for the Devourer's return. The implications hit everyone at once. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy out of boredom or wanderlust. They had left to become strong enough to protect it from a threat that could destroy everything they had helped create. When are the Devourers supposed to return? Yuna asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. So Jung checked the ancient calculations, her hands shaking as she worked. When she found the answer, her face went pale. According to the human projections, the Devourer advance scouts should reach the galaxy's outer rim in approximately 6 months. The main force will arrive 2 years after that. The chamber fell, silent as everyone processed this information. Humanity's return was not an invasion or a homecoming celebration. It was preparation for a war that could determine the survival of all galactic life. No wonder they seem so advanced, Jiho said quietly. They have had 5 centuries to prepare for this fight. As if responding to their conversation, the screens around them lit up with new images. The human fleet was approaching the galaxy's edge in force, with thousands of ships that seemed to bend space around them as they moved. Each vessel was larger than anything in the current galactic navy. armed with weapons that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. But the most impressive sight was the flagship itself. The Eternal Dawn was less a ship than a mobile fortress, its hull bristling with technology that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When it moved, space rippled around it like water disturbed by a stone. Incoming transmission. From Admiral Hyunwoo, Hana announced. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grave but determined. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship hummed with activity. The space around Nexus Prime had never seen anything like it. The main human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships materializing out of folded dimensions, like ghosts becoming solid. At the center of the formation, the Genesis Hammer dominated the view, its massive hull stretching for over 10 kilometers and bristling with weapons that seemed to bend reality around them. Fleet Admiral Kyungmin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the galactic response. With professional interest, every military force in the galaxy was scrambling to respond to their arrival. Hundreds of ships from a dozen different species were taking defensive positions, their crews terrified but determined to protect their homes. Tactical assessment. Commander Nayung, Kyungmin asked his chief engineer. Their combined fleet mass is approximately 6 million tons, she replied, checking her instruments. Our gravitational manipulation systems could disable the entire formation in under 30 seconds. Their weapons cannot penetrate our defensive fields. Kyungmin nodded grimly. He took no pleasure in the vast technological gap between human and galactic forces. These species had achieved remarkable things during humanity's absence, but they were still children playing with toys compared to what his people had become. Open a channel to all galactic vessels, he ordered. Let us try diplomacy first. On the bridge of the galactic flagship, Admiral Sungjae watched the human transmission with growing dread. The figure on his screen looked completely human, but the technology behind him was beyond comprehension. Screens showed data that moved too fast to follow, and the very air around the human admiral seemed to shimmer with contained energy. Admiral Seungjae, Kyungmin said, his voice calm but carrying undertones of absolute authority. I am Fleet, Admiral Kyungmin of the Human Defense Force. We have no quarrel with your people. Stand down your weapons and prepare to receive our diplomatic representatives. This is galactic space, Sungjae replied, trying to keep his voice steady. You have no authority here. Kyungmin's expression remained patient, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Admiral, we created most of the civilizations in this galaxy. We guided their development and protected them from threats they never knew existed. This galaxy is our home, and we are reclaiming it. The transmission ended, leaving the galactic fleet in chaos. Some captains wanted to attack immediately, others demanded retreat. A few suggested surrender before the humans demonstrated their true capabilities. The demonstration came when Science Officer Guang Ho activated his cyber warfare systems. In a matter of seconds, every galactic ship found their communication networks completely compromised. Human messages appeared on their screens, showing detailed schematics of their own ships and complete records of their military capabilities. How are they doing this? Lieutenant Bora gasped as her tactical screens filled with human data. Our networks are isolated and encrypted. They are not breaking our encryption, her commander replied with growing horror. They already know our codes. They have been watching us for so long that they understand our technology better than we do. The revelation that humans had been monitoring galactic civilization for centuries sent shockwaves through every government. Emergency meetings were called as leaders realized that their greatest military secrets were already known to the returning humans. But the greatest shock came when Captain Yunji arrived with the human destroyer Storm's Edge. Her ship was smaller than the massive dreadnoughts, but it moved through space in ways that violated every known law of physics. When the Kavarian Empire finally decided to attack, they discovered just how outmatched they really were. General Thexvor commanded the largest battle fleet in galactic history, over 10,000 ships from 7 different species, armed with the most advanced weapons available: quantum torpedoes, plasma cannons, singularity bombs, and reality disruption fields. Every piece of military technology the galaxy had developed. Over the past millennium, all ships, attack Formation Delta, Thexvor commanded. Target the smallest human vessel first. Show them we will not surrender without a fight. Captain Yunji watched the approaching fleet with calm professionalism. Her ship was surrounded by thousands of enemy vessels, their weapons already charging for the attack. Any other commander would have retreated or called for reinforcement. Instead, she activated her gravitational pulse weapons. The Storm's Edge did not fire conventional weapons. Instead, it manipulated gravity itself, creating waves of distorted space-time that rippled outward at the speed of light. When these waves hit the galactic ships, the results were devastating. Hulls cracked as gravity differentials tore them apart. Crews were knocked unconscious as their own inertia turned against them. Weapons systems failed as their targeting computers could not compensate for the constantly changing gravitational fields. In under 5 minutes, Captain Yunji had disabled over 200 enemy ships without firing a single traditional weapon. The remaining galactic forces found themselves floating helplessly in space, their crews alive but their vessels completely powerless. Galactic Fleet. This is Captain Yunji, she transmitted to the disabled ships. Your crews are unharmed, but your vessels are no longer functional. We will provide rescue ships to evacuate your personnel. Do not attempt further hostile action. The Battle of Terminus Sector lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, the largest military force in galactic history had been completely neutralized by a single human destroyer. 0 human casualties, 0 galactic fatalities, total human victory. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. Some species immediately offered surrender, others went into hiding. A few tried to negotiate alliance terms, but everyone understood that the balance of power had shifted permanently. Back on the archaeological dig, Dr. Minho and his team watched the battle reports with a mixture of awe and terror. The humans they had discovered were not just technologically advanced, they were so far beyond current galactic capabilities that resistance was meaningless. The gravitational manipulation technology alone represents a complete revolution in physics, Dr. Yuna explained to Commander Jiho. They are not just using advanced versions of our technology. They are working with entirely different scientific principles. Dr. Soyoung had been studying the human database when she made another disturbing discovery. The technology humans were using against the galactic fleet was not their most advanced equipment. It was what they classified as basic defensive systems. According to these records, she announced to the assembled team, the weapons used in the battle represent roughly 10% of human military capability. What we just witnessed was them being gentle. Commander Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. What do their real weapons do? So-young showed them technical specifications that made their heads hurt to look at directly. Weapons that could trigger stars to go supernova. Devices that could fold space to create matter disruption fields spanning entire star systems. Technology that could manipulate time itself to create causality paradoxes. They have been preparing for 5 centuries to fight entities that can destroy galaxies, she said quietly. What did we expect them to become? The political reaction was immediate and chaotic. The Galactic Council called for emergency sessions, while individual species made their own decisions about how to respond to human supremacy. Some worlds declared immediate allegiance to humanity. Others tried to negotiate independence. A few simply shut down all external communications and hoped the humans would ignore them. Speaker Vorthak found himself in the impossible position of negotiating with beings who could destroy his entire civilization without effort. When Ambassador Jiwoo arrived on Nexus Prime for the first formal diplomatic meeting, the crystalline leader was forced to confront the reality that his people's fate was entirely in human hands. What do you want from us? Vorthak asked bluntly, when the negotiations began. Jiwoo smiled with what seemed like genuine warmth. We want you to survive. We want your civilizations to continue growing and developing. We want you to help us protect this galaxy from threats that are coming. And if we refuse? The ambassador's expression did not change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Then you will die when the devourers arrive. We will not force anyone to join our defense preparations, but we will not waste resources, protecting those who choose to remain helpless. The message was clear without being threatening. Humanity offered protection and partnership, but only to those willing to accept human leadership. Those who refused would face the coming darkness alone. As news of the human ultimatum spread, most galactic leaders realized they had no real choice. The beings they had dismissed as myths were now offering to save them from an even greater threat. The alternative was extinction. Colonel Taywin summed up the galactic situation perfectly during a briefing with the archaeological team. We can submit to the humans and possibly survive, or we can maintain our independence and definitely die. It is not really a choice at all. But even as galactic civilization adapted to their new reality, the humans continued their preparations for the real war that was coming. Long-range sensors were already detecting disturbing signals from the galactic edge, where something vast and hungry was beginning to stir in the darkness. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Terminus Sector, and the galaxy had become a very different place. On worlds throughout known space, temples rose overnight as some species began worshipping the returned humans as ancient gods. Others hid in their deepest bunkers, terrified of beings whose power seemed unlimited. Political officer Myung-ho stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers, now converted into a coordination center for the new human protectorate. His job was to help the various species adapt to their new reality, but diplomatic protocol became meaningless when one side could remake reality at will. The Vorth delegation is demanding religious autonomy, reported his assistant, Lieutenant Jae-min. They want to continue worshipping their crystal entities without human interference. Granted, Myung-ho replied without hesitation. Admiral Hyun-woo was very clear on this point. We are not here to control their beliefs, only their defense preparations. The challenge was not religious freedom, but practical cooperation. How do you coordinate with species who see you as gods? How do you work with civilizations whose most advanced technology looks primitive compared to your basic tools? The answer came from Chief Science Officer Sang-gyun, whose revelations about human capabilities had shocked even the archaeological team that discovered them. Standing in the converted laboratory that had once been Dr. So-young's translation center, he demonstrated technologies that redefined what was possible. Quantum matter manipulation, he explained to the gathered galactic representatives, casually reshaping a block of solid metal with his bare hands. We can alter the fundamental structure of any material at the molecular level. Ambassador Ji-woo watched the demonstration with the patience of someone who had explained these concepts 1,000 times before. The galactic representatives sat in stunned silence as Sang-gyun continued his presentation. Consciousness transfer technology allows us to back up and restore individual minds, he said, activating a device that projected a perfect holographic copy of himself. Death is no longer permanent for our species. Dr. Yuna, now serving as the Galactic Liaison for Scientific Cooperation, had spent months studying human technology. What she learned challenged everything she thought she knew about the universe. They do not just use advanced science, she explained to Dr. Minho during one of their private conversations. They have discovered that reality itself is more flexible than we believed. Their technology works by convincing the universe to follow different rules. The practical demonstrations were even more shocking. Engineer Commander Na-young showed how human ships could travel between star systems in minutes rather than months. She manipulated space-time itself, creating shortcuts through dimensions that did not exist in normal physics. Folded space navigation, she explained to a group of galactic engineers whose minds were visibly struggling to process what they were seeing. We do not travel faster than light. We convince the universe that 2 distant points are actually the same location. But the most disturbing revelation came when the humans revealed the true scope of their intelligence network. They had not just been watching galactic civilization develop. They knew every individual of importance, understood every cultural nuance, and had detailed psychological profiles of every major leader. We have been studying your species for longer than your recorded history, Political Officer Myung-ho explained to a gathering of planetary governors. We know your languages better than you do. We understand your cultures more completely than your own anthropologists. We have been your silent guardians for millennia. The implications were staggering. Human agents had been present during every major historical event. They had prevented wars, guided technological development, and shaped the evolution of galactic civilization itself. What the current species thought of as their natural development had actually been carefully orchestrated by beings they considered mythical. Speaker Vorthak, now serving as the official galactic representative to the human protectorate, struggled to maintain his dignity while dealing with entities who knew his people's deepest secrets. How long have you been manipulating our development? He asked during one particularly difficult negotiation session. Ambassador Jiwoo considered the question carefully before answering. We prefer the term guidance to manipulation, and the answer is, since the beginning. Your species achieved spaceflight 2,000 years earlier than it would have naturally because we provided subtle technological inspiration. Your current population exists because we prevented 17 different extinction events. The revelation that galactic civilization owed its very existence to human intervention divided the various species into different camps. Some embraced their role as protected children. Others resented being treated as inferior beings. A few demanded to know why the humans had left in the first place. The answer came from Dr. Soyoung, who had been granted access to the deepest levels of the human database. What she found there made her understand why humanity had chosen exile over continued guardianship. They left because staying would have destroyed us, she announced during a briefing with the senior staff. The Devourers were not just a military threat. They were a corruption that spread through contact. Any species that fought them directly became infected with their hunger. Commander Jiho, now serving as the military liaison between galactic and human forces, studied the ancient battle records with growing horror. Are you saying the humans left to avoid becoming like the enemy? Exactly, So-young replied. The only way to fight the Devourers without being corrupted was to develop technology that could destroy them from a distance. That required leaving the galaxy and spending centuries in isolation, building weapons that could kill hunger itself. The technology humans had developed during their exile was beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. They had created weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, devices that could separate cause from effect, technology that could delete concepts from existence itself. But even as the galactic species struggled to understand, their new reality, the threat that had driven humanity into exile, was beginning to manifest. Long-range sensors detected the first disturbances at the galaxy's edge, where space itself was beginning to show signs of infection. The proof came when Captain Dong-yun returned from a scouting mission to the galactic rim, his ship's hull scarred by contact with something that should not exist. His report sent shockwaves through both human and galactic command structures. They are already here, he announced to the emergency council session. Not the main force, but the scouts. The infection is spreading faster than our projections indicated. Fleet Admiral Kyungmin studied the sensor data with grim professionalism. The readings showed entire star systems beginning to change, their planets becoming something alien and hungry. The process was subtle but unstoppable, converting matter itself into a form that served the Devourer's purposes. How long until they reach inhabited space? He asked. 6 months for the infection to reach the outer colonies, Dong-yun replied. 2 years for the main force to arrive. After that, he paused, checking his instruments again. After that, we will discover whether 5 centuries of preparation was enough. The news that the Devourers were already beginning their assault sent panic throughout the galaxy. Some species demanded immediate evacuation to other galaxies. Others wanted to surrender before the fighting began. A few insisted on making last stands on their homeworlds, but the humans had been preparing for this moment for 5 centuries. Admiral Hyunwoo issued a galaxy-wide declaration that would define the next phase of galactic history. Citizens of the galaxy, his voice reached every inhabited world simultaneously. The ancient enemy has returned, but we are not the same species that fled before them. We have become something stronger. We will not abandon this galaxy again. We will not let the darkness win. This time, he continued, his words carrying the weight of absolute determination, we fight. The declaration marked the end of the galaxy's age of innocence. The various species could no longer pretend they were the masters of their own destiny. They were protected children whose guardians had returned to face a threat that could devour existence itself. But they were no longer alone. The myths had become real, and the legends were preparing for war. In the depths of space, human fleets began moving toward the galactic edge, carrying weapons that could reshape reality and crews who had spent lifetimes preparing for this battle. Behind them, galactic forces mobilized with technology that humanity had shared, preparing to fight alongside beings they had once thought were stories told to frighten children. The final war for galactic survival was about to begin, and this time humanity would not retreat into the darkness. The galaxy's edge had become a battlefield unlike anything in recorded history. Where once there had been empty space between star systems, now vast biomechanical structures drifted through the void like infected wounds in reality itself. The Devourer Advance Fleet had arrived in force, their ships the size of moons, and their hunger visible as a dark stain spreading across the cosmos. Fleet Commander Chan Yol stood on the bridge of the human command ship Eternal Vigil, coordinating the largest military operation in galactic history. Before him, tactical displays showed the positions of over 50,000 vessels from dozens of different species, all working together under human leadership for the first time ever. "Status report from all sectors," he commanded, his voice carrying across communication channels that spanned light years. "Galactic Fifth Fleet reports ready for engagement," came the reply from Admiral Seung-jae, whose forces had been equipped with human defensive technology that made their ships barely recognizable. "Human weapon systems are online and responding normally." The transformation of galactic military forces had taken months of intensive preparation. Human engineers had worked around the clock to retrofit alien ships with technology that could actually damage devourer entities. The process had been like trying to teach children to use weapons of mass destruction, but there had been no alternative. Commander Soman adjusted her grip on the controls of the experimental fighter Phoenix Rising as she prepared for the most dangerous mission of her career. Her ship was equipped with quantum phase technology that allowed her to exist partially outside normal space-time, making her invisible to most devourer sensors. "Phoenix Rising to command," she transmitted to Chan Yol. "Beginning reconnaissance run on the primary hive ship. Estimated time to target, 30 minutes. The hive ships were the most terrifying aspect of the devourer fleet. Each one was a living structure that had once been an entire planet, consumed and converted into a mobile factory for producing more devourers. They moved through space by eating the fabric of reality itself, leaving trails of nothingness behind them. Dr. Minho, now serving as the chief analyst for devourer technology, watched Soman's approach with instruments that could barely comprehend what they were measuring. The hive ships operated on principles that violated every known law of physics, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously while consuming energy from the quantum vacuum itself. The largest hive ship masses approximately 40 billion tons, he reported to the command staff, but that measurement is meaningless because roughly half of its structure exists in parallel dimensions. Traditional weapons cannot damage something that is not entirely in our reality. That was why the humans had needed 5 centuries to develop effective countermeasures. The devourers could not be fought with conventional warfare because they existed partially outside the normal universe. Only weapons that could manipulate reality itself had any chance of success. Tactical Officer Jung Hwan was coordinating the evacuation of 17 star systems when the Devourer Advance Scouts made their first major assault. Entire fleets of biomechanical entities emerged from folded space, their presence causing nearby stars to flicker and dim as they fed on stellar energy. "All civilian transports. Emergency Evacuation Protocol 7, he commanded, watching as human transportation technology moved entire planetary populations in a matter of hours. "Military forces, prepare for defensive engagement." The battle that followed tested every tactical innovation humanity had developed during their exile. Galactic ships equipped with human weapons fired reality disruption fields that could damage entities existing in multiple dimensions. Human vessels used gravitational manipulation to create space-time barriers that the devourers could not cross. But the enemy was more advanced than even human projections had suggested. The devourers had spent their own millennia developing new capabilities, and their hunger had grown beyond simple consumption of matter and energy. They now fed on concepts themselves, draining the meaning from existence wherever they passed. The turning point came when Science Director Young-ho and Dr. Min-ho made their breakthrough discovery. Deep in the human database, they found references to the ancient terraforming network that had been used to seed life throughout the galaxy millions of years earlier. "The network is still active," Young-ho announced during an emergency strategy session. Every world that supports life is connected to a quantum entanglement grid that was designed to promote biological development, but the process can be reversed. Dr. Yuna, who had spent months studying the intersection of human and galactic technology, immediately understood the implications. You want to turn the life creation system into a weapon. Not a weapon, Minho corrected. A cure. The Devourers are essentially a form of quantum cancer, corrupting the fundamental structure of reality, wherever they exist. The terraforming network can transmit a counter-signal that will restore normal physics throughout the galaxy. The plan was desperate and unprecedented. It required activating ancient technology that had been dormant for millions of years, coordinating the efforts of every galactic civilization, and using the planet-sized hive ships as transmission nodes for the counter-signal. Fleet Admiral Kyung-min led the final assault on the primary hive ship, while the network activation was prepared. His flagship, Genesis Hammer, had been equipped with humanity's most advanced weapons, including devices that could manipulate the flow of time itself to create tactical advantages. All ships, begin final approach, he commanded, as his fleet moved toward the massive biomechanical structure. Remember, we only need to hold position long enough for the network to activate. Do not attempt to destroy the hive ship until the signal has been transmitted. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Human ships phased in and out of normal space-time, attacking the Devourers from directions that did not exist in three-dimensional reality. Galactic vessels fired weapons that deleted sections of enemy ships from existence entirely. The Devourers responded with attacks that tried to drain the concept of resistance itself from their opponents' minds. Commander Somin found herself flying through the interior of the hive ship, her fighter moving through spaces that were larger inside than outside. The biomechanical corridors writhed around her like living tissue, trying to digest her ship while she searched for the quantum entanglement node that would allow the network to function. "Phoenix rising to command," she transmitted, her voice tight with strain as reality warped around her. "I have located the primary node, but the Devourers are adapting faster than projected. The window for signal transmission is closing." Back on the command ship, Dr. Minho worked frantically to coordinate the network activation. Every inhabited world in the galaxy had to transmit simultaneously, creating a wave of restored reality that would sweep outward at faster than light speeds. "All stations report ready," he announced. "Network activation in 10 seconds. The moment of activation was visible across the entire galaxy. A pulse of pure creative energy swept outward from every life-bearing world, carried by quantum entanglement channels that connected every atom that had ever been influenced by the ancient terraforming process. Where the pulse encountered devourer entities, the result was immediate and devastating. The biomechanical ships simply came apart as the fundamental corruption that held them together was neutralized. Hive ships that had consumed entire solar systems collapsed into collections of ordinary matter that dispersed harmlessly into space. But the victory came at a cost that even the humans had not fully anticipated. The network activation required enormous amounts of energy, which was drawn from the ships and crews operating closest to the transmission nodes. Several human vessels were completely drained, their crews dying as their life force was converted into the signal needed to save the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Kyung-min watched his instruments go dark as the Genesis Hammer gave everything it had to power the network. Around him, his crew worked frantically to keep essential systems online as their ship's hull began to buckle under the stress of channeling forces that could reshape reality. "Hull integrity at 15%, his engineering officer reported. "Recommend immediate evacuation." "Negative," Kyung-min replied calmly. "We maintain position until signal transmission is complete." The final wave of the network pulse swept through the galactic core, neutralizing the last of the Devourer presence, and restoring normal physics throughout known space. Where biomechanical nightmares had been consuming reality itself, now there was only empty space and the debris of entities that could no longer exist. The galaxy was saved, but at the cost of thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of lives, from both human and galactic forces. The victory celebrations were muted by the knowledge that even legends could bleed and die. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and damaged vessels limped back to their home ports, Ambassador Jiwoo addressed the galaxy one final time. His message was broadcast to every inhabited world, carried by the same network that had just saved them all. citizens of the galaxy," he said, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who had seen the price of survival. "The ancient enemy has been defeated, but we must remember what we learned during this war. We are all connected,